This is In the Black with T. Dallas Smith. Conversations with trailblazers, glass ceiling breakers, and champions for change who inspire and cultivate leaders every day.
My guest is Egbert Perry, the chairman and CEO of the Antigua Group, a national urban development company he co-founded in 1993 with a mission to create value in cities and rebuild the fabric of communities. With a distinguished career spanning over 4 decades, he has not only transformed urban landscapes across the United States, but has also served as the chairman for Fannie Mae, solidifying his reputation as a thought leader in housing and community economic development. Egbert, welcome to In the Black.
Hello, Mr. T. Dallas Smith. How are you doing?
Man, I'm good. This is, I think, episode 13 for In the Black. And it hit me as the year was winding. I hadn't had Egbert on here because I swear we talk every day about 2-3 times a day. And so a lot of things, all the nuggets I get from you on a regular basis, I think sometimes I can take for granted and I try to hold it to myself. But I was like, the world needs to hear these nuggets. And I realized I've been sleeping on Egbert Perry. I need to make sure I get Egbert Perry on In the Black. So I really appreciate you doing this, man. Big time.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And just so you know, maybe this is divine intervention because 13 is a lucky number for me since my birthday is July 13th. While some people think about 13 as negative, it's great for me. So maybe if you were calling me, I was supposed to be on episode 13.
13. There we go, man. Well, I appreciate it. Well, we're going to get right into it. And I'm talking to a dear friend, big brother, I call him. So a lot of the things I'm going to be asking you, I already know, but I love the story and I'd like the listening audience to hear the story of Egbert Perry. So I want to talk, let's just start from the beginning. You grew up in Antigua. Did I say it right?
You said it right.
All
Yes.
right. You grew up in Antigua. Talk about how growing up in Antigua influenced the person that you are.
Well, Antigua is, I call it my little piece of heaven on earth. It's the rock in the middle of the Caribbean, just a little piece of rock. And when I was a young boy, there were about 60,000 people on the island. And it is what I described as the proverbial African village. You know the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. That's the African saying. And it is truly my background. So in that little village, called the whole island a village, it was adults looking out for young people. Everything was centered around trying to help the young people be successful. It was a different time when our values really did reflect that old African village set of values. It's communal in nature, about the family, since everybody was sort of in the same economic strata. We were all poor. All of the adults had decided that the path forward for the young people was centered around a great education. And so education was primary. And we were told that the arrangement is you get up every day, go to school, do your homework, excel in school, and that charts your future. So everything was organized around that. And, it was just a great environment to be in. And so I look back at it fondly and I recognize that is the foundation of how I view the world and what's important. I also was in a family of 10 siblings, so 11 of us, and a mother and father that had a set of values that by the time you combine the aspirations with the African village and in a household with the parents I had, it's just could not have been any better, better a foundation.
One of the things that you talk about that is your work ethic and some of the things that you learned from your mother and your father specifically. Talk about that little piece. Not a little piece. It's a big influence.
Yeah, well, no question. And there's a positive side and a negative side to that. My father died at a young age. He was only 51. And I think he worked himself to death. So the negative side of it is he probably worked too hard. In him, I saw a man who, for the entirety of the time I knew him, he worked 18 hours a day. He was just, his objective was to take care of his family. All of that said, I think I inherited a lot of his work ethic. So I can say comfortably, there's nobody that can outwork me. That's a good thing and a bad thing, right? There's nobody that can outwork me. And that's core to who I am. My mother was the disciplinarian, and she ran the household. She worked from the house. She was a seamstress and did a lot of stuff that got sold in stores, but that's how she contributed to the household income. And my father was a serial entrepreneur. We had a little shop in the islands. We call it a shop, but we sold chick feed or animal feed. We sold rice, we sold flour, we sold a lot of different things. But he basically created a poultry sector on the island. And it sounds more financially rewarding than it really was, because he was not driven to make a lot of money, but he was driven to try and help a lot of people get into the poultry business. And so I learned early on what entrepreneurship looked like. So that's the environment I grew up in.
Well, so you had two entrepreneurs in the house.
That's right.
So it's in the DNA. So talk about the journey from Antigua to the United States.
I was very lucky. Beyond that luck that I described, I won a scholarship to finish my last 2 years of high school in New York. A gentleman who, his kids went to what was considered the most prestigious private school in New York City. His kids went there, but he had a second home in Antigua. Loved the island. The school was a boarding school, so it had 2 years before it was going to stop being a boarding school. So he put up a scholarship for a kid who had 2 years of school left. And I ended up winning that scholarship. And that's how I came to the States. Now, all of that said, and it was a great advantage and an early start, but all of my siblings, I was going to do what they did, which was you graduate from high school, you spend a couple of years working at home, save up a little bit of money, get a visa to the States, let the visa expire. You may then become illegal, but you get to school, however you get to school, and you make your way through and look back and you've done what you've done, but that's the path. And that's the path that most of the people from the islands follow. You either, if you're from the English-speaking Caribbean and a small island, the university system don't exist. So in Antigua, we didn't have a university because it's only 60,000 people.
Yeah.
But there was University of the West Indies, which is an outstanding school, but it only took X number of students. So most people, if you're from the English-speaking Caribbean, you end up going to the UK, the US, or Canada. And so you'll find a lot of English-speaking Caribbean folks living in those three geographies. And so I would have gone that route. And so there's no question in my mind I would have made my way some way like all my other siblings did.
And what was the name of the boarding school?
It's called Riverdale Country Day. It's in the West Bronx. And so I finished high school there as opposed to my high school in Antigua, which was St. Joseph's Academy, which was a Catholic school.
And you tell the story about your father sending you some money.
Well, yeah, it puts everything in perspective, right? Because
right.
in Antigua, I thought we were rich, actually. We had 3 meals a day. I never was food insecure. I was never housing insecure, but I later looked back and realized that we lived in 8 different places while I was growing up, and I left home at just turned 15. It's because we never really owned a home, and all of this, I thought we were actually well off because we had a business. But when I went up to the boarding school, I had gone to New York a week earlier, a little over a week earlier. I had a sister who was living on Hollis Avenue in Queens in New York. And I stayed there for a week. So I got acclimated. So by the time I went up to the boarding school, there was an envelope waiting there for me with my father's return address on it. And I got there. They said, "Oh, Egbert, there's an envelope for you in the business office. You need to go over there." And I got the envelope, looked at it, opened it, and in it was a one sheet of paper, blank sheet of paper, and folded in it was a $20 bill, 20 US, which is about $54 at home. And so it was from my father. He didn't say anything. He just sent me that. Now, when I left home, he had already given me $30 or so. So I really thought I had a lot of money already.
Right. Right.
And when I stayed in Queens, I didn't have to really spend any money because my sister and brother actually lived together there, gave me tokens so I could go into the city. I wasn't supposed to eat anything because the food was at home. So I took the tokens, went, visited, and so on. So I still didn't really understand the economics. And so when I got that envelope and opened it and saw the $20, I cried. I couldn't believe my father was sending me all this money.
Yeah.
So I went back to the dormitory and got on the payphone and called collect back home. And my father answered, and I said, "Daddy, you don't need to send me this much money. I'm going to be fine. I'm okay." All in tears, emotionally overcome. And I sent the money back. And I mailed the $20 back to him. And a few days later, a couple of the guys from the dorm decided they wanted to go down to the city, call it the city, and buy burgers and so on. So asked me if I wanted to go. So I went with them, walked in there, looked up on the board and saw the menu and saw the prices and saw what a hamburger costs. And I started crying again because I wish I hadn't sent that $20 back home. But that day, Dallas, was the day I realized that we didn't have any money.
Wow.
That we were economically challenged. And so that was a sobering day for me. And so from that day, my ambition became, by the time I graduated, I wanted to have $250 above and beyond what the price of the ticket back home would be. And so I started cutting classes so I could cut grass, paint, do all these odd jobs so I could save up some money. But that was my reaction to the realization of being poor. And by the way, and Riverdale was obscenely the other way.
You're right.
Everybody was extremely wealthy. And I'm sure they had no idea that I didn't have a pot to pee in.
Well, you was smart as hell, still smart as hell. But
yes,
as we talk about the transition from Riverdale to you end up at the University of Pennsylvania.
Right. That's right.
And at the Wharton School. Right. Is that right?
Well, I went to Wharton as well. Wharton is just one of the schools in there. But I really went into my undergraduate, and one of my graduate degrees was in engineering. So I was really more an engineering student than a business school student. But while in grad school, I also came out of the PhD program in engineering to stop at the master's and enroll in the business school. And so I was in
a PhD in engineering.
No, that's where I was. And
got it.
I was talked out of that by my roommate, who said, "Well, you're not going to do teaching or research. Why don't you go into Wharton and do some business courses, because you're more entrepreneurially oriented. And I resisted at first, and then I said, okay, let me try this. So I went into Wharton and I took a finance course and an accounting course in that semester, fell in love with it, went back to my faculty advisor and advised him that I was going to come out of the PhD program and do a master's and enroll in Wharton. So, because I didn't want to do the PhD program and also be in the business school. That was just going to be too long in college. In those days, the extra year and a half sounded like
sounds so long.
Exactly. And of course, I've looked back many times and wish I had just stayed in that. What's a year and a half?
Which engineering?
My graduate degree is in structural engineering. My undergraduate is civil. And so I was in the PhD program for structural engineering, but didn't do that.
Well, while you at UPenn, you also tutored a lot of students.
I did.
In mathematics, right?
Calculus and engineering courses, yeah.
And one student that you tutored was Donata Russell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can't remember if I tutored Donata or her roommate.
Okay.
And it really was more like I tutored so many students, a lot of people came to my sessions. And so Donata or her roommate was there, but I was known on campus for tutoring calculus mainly to a lot of students. So Donata, I think where you're going is Donata got my resume from the faculty administrator that ran the tutoring center and sent it to her father and said, oh, you need to try and recruit this guy. I didn't know any of this.
And her father is Herman J. Russell, for those who are listening.
That's correct.
Donata is the daughter. So, but that's how you meet Donata. Well, that's how the resume ends up at Herman Russell, because I want to talk about how you get from UPenn to Atlanta.
Yeah. So yes, I did not know this until I had been in Atlanta for a year and heard the story from Herman.
Okay.
But she sent the resume and said, you got to try and recruit this guy. I remember getting a call from a Herman Russell, who I knew nothing about.
Right.
He wanted to interview me to come to Atlanta to work for his firm, something I had no interest in. I was only going to go to D.C. because my girlfriend had graduated, moved to D.C. I was going to D.C. So I really kind of turned him down and went to work at a job in D.C. And when I saw the glass ceiling very, very early there, I thought, I don't need this. So I picked up the phone and called him a year later to ask him if he was still interested in talking. And ended up, he said yes, and flew me down that weekend, interviewed me, offered me a job. And I finished out my tenure in D.C. about 2 or 3 months later, and then moved to Atlanta to start working for Russell. So that was the very beginning of 1980.
And I want to clarify, the girlfriend in D.C. was Renee, who is your wife now.
That's correct.
I want to be clear. If the first lady listens to this, Renee, I want you to know, I don't want the audience that goes, he had some girlfriend here, and then he came back. Okay, no, that was the person who was his wife now, and been married 40 plus years.
Yeah, little over that, 44 years.
44 years. So anyway, I just want to make sure I put that little nugget there. So
I guess that could be an important detail.
Hey, again, if Renee hears this, it'll be very important. So I want to make sure
that she knows that's who we're talking about.
That's who we're talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Fair
but
enough.
you call Mr. Russell. You guys arrange a time for you to come visit him.
Yes.
Talk about that visit.
It was really a shocker for me. Of course, you go to Riverdale for 2 years. Riverdale was so expensive. Riverdale was $4,300 a year at a time when my oldest brother was at Stanford at $3,700 a year. Okay, so Riverdale was expensive.
Yeah.
And that was real money in those days because that's the 70s. That's 1970 to 72. And then Penn, you go to Penn for 7 years. And then here I am, I'm showing up to H.J. Russell and Company. And it was a small operation. Herman Russell was much bigger than H.J. Russell and Company, right? In terms
That's right.
of brand and identity. So
Right.
it was big, but the opportunity as I saw it right then, little company, wasn't exactly what I thought about after so many dollars spent on my education. But I liked HJ. We sat down, we chatted, then we went to Pascal's, had lunch,
Yes.
and he extended the offer. And I thought about it, and because of HJ and another gentleman there named John Lawrence, they were the reasons why I said, okay, you know what? Let me do this. So that's how I made the decision.
You skipped a little area. I want you to go back just a little bit. Go back to when he met you, and and the title that you had was assistant to the president.
That's right. As
assistant to the president, he asked you to put a plan together.
Yeah. So that was in.
Yeah, talk about that.
Let me back up. So I started work January 4th, 1980. And so I said January 4th, January 7th, 1980. Sorry, I came down January 4th. In April of that year, 1980, he asked me to do a business plan for the company, which I did. Gave it to him in October. By then, I had turned 25 because my birthday, as I said, is July 13th. So gave it to him. One Saturday in November, he asked me to come in and spend some time and talk about the plan, which we did. And at the end of the meeting, he said, okay, so I'm putting you in charge of all the construction operations December 1st of next month, which was December 1st. So I took over there December 1st, 1980, at 25. That was what I didn't understand or appreciate is when HJ gives you a title, and Dallas, you know this, when he gives you a title, he gives you a big title so that whatever job he gives you to do inside of that is already covered, so he doesn't have to increase your salary, right? So as assistant to the president, anything the president was doing, I'm automatically covered. So the little bit of money he was paying me was already the salary, and the additional responsibility didn't naturally automatically mean more money.
Yeah, I'm laughing because that's spot on.
Yeah, so HJ had a thing going. He understood what he was doing. So,
no doubt.
Anyway, so that was the opportunity, and the plan was the company was going to be $1 billion company by 1995, 15 years, so on and so forth. But I got an opportunity as a kid, really, not knowing much of anything, that I would never have gotten anywhere else. And I got that opportunity from Herman Russell. So I feel I owe a tremendous amount to H.J. Russell for the opportunity he gave me. And as a result, opened the door for a lot of people to have opportunities that he was creating without necessarily thinking or knowing that that's what he was doing.
No doubt about it. And I echo just what you just said. And we both owe a lot to HJ. And we often talk about lessons learned from HJ that we didn't realize we were getting at the time. And we may even not even like what the hell we were going through, but there was a hell of a lesson going through it. So it brings me to a question.
What do you mean may not have liked
it? We did not like it.
We damn sure didn't like it. Yes. Yes.
We did not like it. And so I'm thinking about particularly looking back on your career at that time. I want you to tell this story that I think something that became very pivotal to how you do what you even do today. And this is the deal that you found in Alabama. You come back, tell HJ about this opportunity. Please tell that story.
Yeah, well, at the time, I was really just looking for some construction business. And one of the ways I was going to generate a bunch of construction activity was to control the development process. And I had read a plan in Birmingham for the redevelopment of a part of the city, and thought of a way to enter in a very risk-free way, but in a way that would be advantageous to the city, and we would get designated as the developer to develop a project, a major project, and we would build it, our construction operation would build it, and so on. And so I thought, perfect, I can do this and generate a good bit of activity for the company. So I took the company into Birmingham, and in the process, came up with this mixed-use development on the south side of town. Thought it was perfect, just a major parking deck, residential, retail, and to do the residential and retail, which was really those were the pieces that were going to be long-term value creation, in addition to just the construction opportunity. But the parking deck was a big, sizable deck that was going to support not just that project, but a nearby facility. And so came up with this nice mixed-use project, came into HJ and said, HJ, I got a perfect deal. I want you to look at it. Laid it out, showed him the pro forma, and it required him putting in a few $100,000, but the returns were going to be great. And so he listened to the plan, the whole plan, and then he said, so what are you saying you want me to do? I said, HJ, all you have to do is write a check for X number of dollars, and we'll have so many tens of millions of dollars of construction revenues and so on and so forth. And he looked at me and said, boy, you out your damn mind. I ain't putting no damn money. You want me to go in my pocket and write a check? You just don't get what this program is. I ain't about to do that. So I'm now just blown away, upset as hell, thought I had a perfect, easy plan. The economics were clear. So I'd go back, and I'm trying to figure out how to do this. So I decided, I went to the city and said, okay, I want you to enter into a lease. I'm not going to buy the property from you. We're going to lease it. You're going to have a participation in that lease, and your participation is going to be, the lease is going to be paid by your participation in the deal. And the city loved it because it ended up being the first project in that area that caused the revitalization of that whole section of downtown Birmingham, South Downtown. But that project, or that lease structure, ended up being something I would do 70, 80 times in my career after that, now many years later at Antigua. But I got that idea because HJ basically said, boy, you're crazy as hell. I'm not doing that. You get out of my office and come back with something that makes some sense. So by the time I went back to him, he didn't have to put any money in. We had a real nice project. The city ended up having a win-win because they were getting redevelopment and making money off of it by being part of what was a public-private partnership. And I didn't know that years later, I would use that same formula to do probably 75 or 80 projects. I got that because HJ was so hard-headed and cheap. And as somebody said, HJ is so tight, he squeaks.
Right. Well, we talk about the power of being broke.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't like being broke, but the power of being broke really makes you stretch in a way that you never would have figured it out if he just handed you the money.
That's right.
Who knows if, yeah. So that if he handed you the money, that the precedent could have become, well, I got to get the money from him every time,
That's
or
right.
I got to do this every time.
That's right.
If I don't have that, I don't have an answer. So for people who are listening to this, I just want them to understand the power of being broke. On your brokest day right now, think about more about the solutions, not so much about financial, because it's not always financial. There's a solution, a creative solution somewhere, and that's what you did. So I love that story. I can hear it 100 times.
The person who first said necessity is the mother of invention, he or she knew what they were saying, because that's really what that is. There was no other option. It wasn't like I could say, okay, I'm going to put the money in there, or I'm going to go talk to my friend over here with a bunch of money and have them put the money in. So the solution had to be something that was invented, or I had to use some inventive skills to figure out how to do that deal. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten that project done. And the end result is I would not have been able to generate the construction activity I was looking to generate.
But also think about, Egbert, how many people would have just quit because they couldn't get to that next step. HJ wouldn't give you the money. Oh, well, we don't have the money. I'm quit. I'm going to go get me a good job somewhere.
Yeah, fair enough. You're right. Yeah, absolutely.
So how often that happens, you know? But anyway, I so appreciate you sharing that story. And I want to get into the genesis of the Integral Group. But we have to take a pause here. Coming up next on In the Black, Egbert Perry will break down the concept of market permission.
We have a responsibility as we do business to help give market permission to a whole generation that follows. And if we don't do that, then shame on us.
This has been In the Black with T. Dallas Smith. To find out how you can change the dominant narrative in the commercial real estate industry and challenge the status quo to improve the lives of others, go to tdsintheblack.com. In the Black with T. Dallas Smith is a production of Forbes Books.